we need to talk about what really matters. And what really matters is that a truck carrying 100 lab monkeys crashed. Some lady tried petting the monkey, and now she's got COVID symptoms.
Yeah, okay.
Correlation is not causation.
So this is a hard segue off of the media into something much more fun.
Yes.
And potentially apocalyptic. So this is the story. You guys may have heard that a truck crashed in like near Scranton, and 100 monkeys were on it, lab monkeys. The monkeys are in high demand right now because they're doing COVID research on them, I guess. That's what they report in the Daily Mail. So a couple of the monkeys escaped. Some lady gets out of her car after the truck crashes. She steps in monkey poop, walks over to one of the cages that's busted open apparently, and tries to pet the monkeys.
What was she thinking?
She wanted rabies.
What happened next?
So, yeah.
She's now sick.
Will not shock
with
you.
what she describes as COVID symptoms. She's saying she's got COVID symptoms. She called it a day from hell. She's being quarantined. Apparently, they sent letters out to law enforcement who responded saying you've got to quarantine for like 31 days because there's like monkey diseases you could get. And they're also isolating the monkeys to figure out if they got diseases. Everybody's tweeting at me, Planet of the Apes, 12 monkeys, and the movie Outbreak because they're like, this is how it happens. So, I think it's funny that we can joke about it, be like, ha ha ha, the monkey truck crashed and a lady got sick. And it's just like, what if within like a month there's like, 300 confirmed cases of monkey COVID or whatever.
Monkey rabies.
And then we're like, it's just 300 people in that area. They've quarantined it. And then like a year later, it's like COVID 20 monkey syndrome is like going crazy.
What would you name the monkey variant?
The monkey variant. That's what you'd call it, bro. You just did it.
Call it the monkey variant. Yeah. I have to point out that this happened in my home state of Pennsylvania, up on I-80 in the middle of nowhere. This lady was driving along and saw the crash and like, do not approach, do not feed the animals. Like, do not congratulate.
Let me show you my tweeted, holy-ish, it's happening. Someone, this guy Nico responded with just a picture of Alex Jones leaning back with his hands in front of his mouth. Yeah, taking a deep breath. But I'm gonna say this as a mostly as a joke, but also just as an idea. This story is a little on the nose. It's like, it's a lottery ticket, in my opinion, that a monkey truck crashes, they're lab monkeys, and a woman just happened to be following it, gets out, decides to try and touch the monkeys. They hiss at her. She gets sick. And I'm like, this is the perfect narrative for the start of a new variant. You know what I mean?
We're just checking the box. We're just checking the boxes here. Yeah. I mean, this is I still can't believe that this is real.
Here's the crazy thing.
The funny things to me is that there's exactly 100 monkeys on the train, which maybe isn't that weird to people, but
especially if it's like lab research that they wouldn't have like some.
Why not 99?
62.
Why not 101? People love those. They're so weird.
Well, I mean, 100
easier
monkeys
to categorize
seems like a round
them.
number.
10, 10, and 10.
But here's the crazy thing, right? So when we were researching this story,
yes, indeed,
I was like, let's try and pull up this article. And so I was looking at all these stories. None of them mention the woman is saying she has COVID symptoms except her on her Facebook post, and the Daily Mail got it. When you pull up all of these stories on Google, they all just say she's got pink eye. She's got pink eye. That's it.
Oh.
And then you take a look at the what she actually posted on Facebook, and she says the symptoms are COVID symptoms, like seriously a day from hell. That's what she said. Jeez. Why is the media not reporting that she has COVID symptoms? Don't they like the fear? Don't they want the fear?
Yeah, exactly right. And what's to say it's not COVID? But the idea that she said it and put it out there and they don't want anything to do with it, I mean, it's pretty pathetic that you're willing to stoop down to, you would think when you're putting together a news story about this insanity, you would think that you would want a post, like a Facebook post, where it's a good paragraph of her retelling of what happened. You would think that you would want to include that in your news reports.
But why are they downplaying it? That's what I don't understand. She said COVID symptoms, and we pulled up all these other stories, and it's like pink eye. She has pink eye.
Exactly.
Like, okay.
They don't want to talk about it, and they're
maybe they're afraid that there's going to be like she has COVID symptoms, and then she'll turn out to be like, actually, it turned out I just had the cold, and they'll be like, oh, but there's COVID systems, but it was a cold.
I think I don't know what to think, to be completely honest. This one's weird to me. The media would love to push a COVID scare narrative. I mean, they make money on it.
Yeah, the permanent lockdowns, they have continuous stories day after day of people in hospitals, people dying. Mm-hmm. And it's very sad. I understand that. And these are people's loved ones. However, yeah, it is pure fear porn. It's actual death.
But they're not pushing it.
And they're not pushing it. Whereas previously with Russia, it was this fear of something that really wasn't attached to people's lives. But now they have something that, saying if you don't do as we say, you'll die.
Right.
Oh, with the COVID stuff, you mean?
Yeah. Whereas COVID versus other things.
In her Facebook post, she specifically says symptoms are COVID symptoms. She said, I'm very low risk for I don't know what yet, but symptoms are COVID symptoms.
I think that part of the problem here is that the media this is a narrative they can't control. I think that's the reason that we can't find her Facebook post anywhere except the Daily Mail. I think that they're trying to get a hold of the story and try to see how they can spin it. I think it's too early for them to really have their actual narrative lined up perfectly yet. And
I think, if it turns out to not have been COVID, I would guarantee you they would backtrack and put it up. And saying, she thought Fallon thought she had COVID symptoms.
Right.
Yeah.
But she ended up not.
Is she maybe saying something else? Like what could that possibly mean other than, like that's the story. She's saying that she's got sick. They say in the title that she has a cough and pink eye, and then in her Facebook post says symptoms are COVID symptoms.
Saying that a cough is COVID symptoms is a little like
no. They're saying when she said symptoms are COVID symptoms. They said a cough.
They're saying it's a cough.
She literally, in the Facebook post they put from her, it says COVID symptoms.
But like if you look at these Omicron COVID symptoms, I saw 5 of them. It's like runny nose, fever, fatigue. And you're like, oh, okay, those are also cold symptoms. So if she goes out and they go out and she says she might have COVID, she has COVID symptoms, and it turns out she has a common cold, people be like, but she did have COVID symptoms, and it turns out she had a common. Like, so maybe it wasn't.
Big deal. When you see that in China now, there was a report I saw from one of the networks this morning. They reported that in China now, if you go into a drugstore and you buy cough medicine like Tylenol, and the government will flag you and say that you have to go get COVID tested.
Wow.
What? That they noticed that if you went into a drugstore and you went to the aisle and bought these specific medicines that everybody goes to a CVS or Walgreens nowadays to get, Tylenol, ibuprofen or cough syrup, the government will flag you and say, you need to go get COVID tested because you're buying these medications for symptoms that line up with COVID. I mean,
it's one way to inflate the cases.
But we're going to send our athletes into this.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
I don't know, what'll end up happening with the story. I kind of feel like nothing. It's like the monkeys escaped. I think they killed them. They captured a couple and then killed one of them. Like, the report is that the monkey was seen in a tree and then several shots rang out. People didn't watch what happened.
Jeez.
But it's
you're
it's
in
like
rural
when
PA.
It's like when you're like watching a movie and they take the animal off camera and then you hear a bang. It's implied what they did.
I don't like that.
But I just want to point out. Take a look at this picture right here. Look at homeboy.
Yeah.
One of the monkeys pictured was found in a tree, and 3 shots were later heard. WNEP reported. Imagine being this dude, right? And you're born or bred or captured by these giant creatures who are poking you and prodding you and injecting you with stuff, and then the ship they're on crashes and you get out and you're hiding just like terrified and desperate, and they see you and they just kill you.
Imagine if you were like born into a country and the social media networks were experimenting on you and your government was experimenting on you, and then you tried to escape.
North Korea?
I'm talking about the United States.
You can escape the United States fairly easily.
You can kind of escape. You can't escape the system though. They don't want you off the grid.
Yeah, man,
you can't escape it.
So my thing is like, I feel bad for this dude. Look at him, man. He's chilling. He's not doing anything. Look how he's probably scared. He's probably like, I just want to be left alone.
It's what monkeys do. You see, they climb the trees and they're just chilling out. They're trying to live their best lives here.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Were these monkeys infected with something beforehand? Did it ever come out, or were they on their way to get tested on?
They haven't said yet. What the article from the Daily Mail says is that monkeys are in high demand for COVID research to do experiments on them. And that it's also true that monkeys can carry herpes B.
Oh boy!
Which, if infects a person, they get brain swelling and then die.
Yeah, it's not
good. The herpes B virus. It's extremely rare, but it can kill you if you don't get treated for it. And I think there's only been ever one case of it transmitting from person to person. So it's like not that good at infecting humans. But that's why they're scared about these monkeys. I just feel bad for the monkey bro who's like, I am finally free, and then he like climbs the tree and he's like looking around and they just shoot him.
Like spoiler alert, Harrison Bergeron, man.
Oh yeah.
That monkey had a Harrison Bergeron moment.
Yeah, sure did.
Well, how did he have a Harrison?
Stepped out into the freedom and tasted it for a moment.
Yeah. Is that what happens at the end of Harrison Bergeron? They kill him.
Yeah.
They do?
It's not good.
I believe.
No, I thought it just ended.
It ends with like
Have
the
you ever
door
read-
getting kicked open and a bunch of people screaming and death.
Really?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Downer.
No,
Yeah.
I thought
I read it
I
in
thought it was a
couple
short story. I'm pretty sure I read
I'll
it.
look it up. I'm curious.
Yeah, I think.
I
at the
think you were
end-
thinking of
I'll
something
look that up.
else. Maybe I'm wrong.
I remember that not turning out so well for Harrison.
No, Harrison.
I don't know, man.
Or
But
the
yes,
monkey.
But yes, shout out to rural PA. Danville, PA is where it took place.
Oh, wow.
Great people in central Pennsylvania, but I don't know. I would not want to be
Monkeys.
living near there right now, but that's just me.
I wonder what they were doing with these guys, these monkeys. You know?
Oh, definitely taking them to test on them for sure. Well, they're
No, they're
medical
lab
tests.
monkeys.
Yeah,
Yeah, but like, were they doing COVID research?
putting
That's
like
what the
chemicals in
article
their
says.
eyes.
Imagine, one of the a senator asking Fauci about this the next year.
Dr. Fauci, 100 monkeys. Well, you know, Fauci runs that monkey island.
Right.
Well, okay, I got to.
That's-
That's a little hyperbolic.
that's-
Fauci funded through the NIAID this monkey island thing. They basically breed a bunch of monkeys in captivity to do torture, like to experiment on.
Maximum pain.
Yeah, and they call it's being called by activists maximum pain experiments,
Messed
where
up.
they take the monkeys and try and make them feel as much pain as possible to see what they can tolerate before like passing out or whatever. Yo, Fauci's got a track record for doing
messed
real
up.
messed up stuff.
Yeah, and speaking of Tucker earlier, that's been something he's really been talking a lot about. He's had people from PETA on. When did you expect someone
Really?
from PETA being on Fox News?
I think Peter's trash.
It's true.
That's when someone becomes science, you know, it's no longer ethical. When the ethics are out the window, it's science first, ethics second. Like Fauci has actually declared he was the science. What a strange thing for a human to declare. That's like Nazi scientists, man. They would put the science first, the ethics came second. Experimenting on a populace with a rushed vaccine is like, I get it. In an emergency, you maybe there's precedent, but man, it is still an experimentation.
Well, for I think we were talking. Who were we talking to? I think maybe it was Badia Ungar-Sargon. The vaccines that came out for, you know, with Operation Warp Speed went through the clinical trials with people who volunteered for it, and even the right was very critical of parents who were offering up their kids to volunteer for the trials and stuff like that. So they went through their basic trials, and then we had a discussion about the Nuremberg Code because people were saying that they're still doing long-term testing, which is happening now because typically it takes like a long time. But by that standard, if that's experimental, everything is, because they're constantly rolling out new treatments that they're then, you know, collecting data for long-term studies.
Yeah, it's really like only the
So-
Tuskegee experiment. The things we
Right,
hear about
that's-
after effect, when things have gone wrong, is when we really can look at it and say, well, that was a bad experiment.
Which, if you recall, Joe Biden confused Tuskegee Airmen with the Tuskegee experiment. He talked about why African Americans aren't getting vaccinated. He referred to, what happened to the Tuskegee Airmen is a barrier for African Americans to get vaccinated.
This stuff is draining.
I know.
It's draining.
It's
Yeah.
impressive that we talk about it every night.
Well,
I think about that daily.
When you guys are talking about examples inside the United States, you go to China, what the Soviets were doing. Yes, not in Nazi Germany. That stuff, the depravity there.
You want to talk about honesty and things that people never want to talk about? How much have Americans benefited from the human experimentation of the Nazis and the Japanese?
Yeah.
A great deal.
Yeah.
That horrifying unit in Japan, they would
731.
731. One of the stories I read is that they took people and they would like stick their arms out into sub-zero temperatures to watch what would happen to a person who was in between, and then they would like shatter the arm once it froze just to see what would happen. And because of that psychotic research, we are able to save tons of lives when it comes to frostbite. Wow.
Yeah.
It's
that-
horrifying,
No
isn't
idea.
it?
Yeah.
You know,
that is-
people need to have a dose of reality. These monkey experiments are horrifying. The beagle experiments are horrifying. But sometimes we don't know what we're going to find when we do stupid things, when we do crazy things.
True.
So, you know, my thing is like, I'm not going to be naive and just outright be like, we should ban all of this stuff. Cause I'm like, we do animal testing for medications before we put it on humans because we don't want humans to die. And it sucks that animals die in the experimentation, but what's the alternative? Don't have medical advancement, don't do trials, don't do experimentation.
I just looked up, what has medicine learned from the Nazis? This is from The Guardian, and the first sentence is a lot.
a lot. Ugh.
That's horrifying.
Including
man.
X-rays.
It
I mean, it
is.
just goes on and on and on. If you
How
wanna look at
are
the
we
list.
supposed to advance medical technology if we don't do like
experiment
research.
on ourselves. I mean,
Yeah.
true. That's
So-
the
so-
history
so-
of medicine.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Right to try legislation, I
Yes.
think, is a huge opportunity. In that you've got people who have nothing left to lose, who are like, "Yo, I'm dying. I need something. Let me try this experimental medication because I got nothing left to lose." I'm like that. I think Florida recently signed that legislation. Ron DeSantis did.
yeah.
That's good. Trump was very much in favor of this, I think, too.
Yeah, before the show, we were talking about this gentleman who got the heart transplanted from a pig, which was really interesting because they did a deep dive on him after the fact, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this guy had committed a bunch of terrible crimes." And I was like, it makes sense to me that they would experiment with this weird heart on a guy who had committed crimes. It sounds terrible to say, but then we got to talking about Unit 731. I was like, this is terrible, but this is where we are, and this is how we've learned a lot of the things we've learned.
It was the news cycle on this has been fascinating because the Washington Post had this glowing story because it happened up in Baltimore, and then it was probably maybe 3 days later it came out. It was a story right on the front page, and the whole thing is deconstructing what happened. That this guy was in a fight, I think in Hagerstown, got in a bar fight with somebody who was feeling up his wife, and he stabbed him and left him paralyzed, and he served years in prison.
Whoa.
And so he was a thing for this. And the entire piece is because he's still in the hospital and he's not really able to do interviews, needless to say. So his poor son has been left to have to talk about this and like, what do you have to say about this? Does your dad really deserve? Basically, the Post trying to argue, does your dad really deserve life?
Jeez.
And it's a really sad question here, but obviously doctors are going to look really good if this ends up working.
I think if people, I think I understand why there's certain people who want to keep the populace in the dark on a lot of issues, because I think regular people don't want to acknowledge the great benefits they get. The really awful things that Anthony Fauci has authorized have I don't know to what extent they've benefited us, but it's not so much about what he specifically has done. I think the gain of function stuff has kind of screwed us substantially.
Yeah.
But in general, if the American people actually got an honest assessment of everything they've gained in exchange for the pain and suffering caused by a lot of research and war, I really wonder what this country would be like. Because I remember saying this during 2015 when Hillary was running, and I would tell my friends, and I'd be like, do you like the way you live? Do you like your wealth, American, empire? Do you like traveling the world and having whatever you want? I'll vote for Hillary Clinton because she's going to maintain the status quo of the global elites in the war, the bombings, Syria, all that stuff, and you're going to benefit from it. Do you want to end that stuff? Do you want to try and pull it back? Do you want to focus on this country? Vote for Donald Trump. But a lot of people didn't want to have that conversation. They don't want to acknowledge that the United States benefits greatly off of war for a variety of reasons. That when Donald Trump came out and said he was talking about selling weapons to the Saudis, he said it's going to be fantastic. All this money is going to be great for our economy. Yup, it is.
Yeah.
It's money coming. It's oil. So that's basically what's happening. We do a weapons deal with Saudi Arabia. We say we've got all these weapons. We're going to sell you. You give us money. That money we use to buy oil. And oil, free energy, means human beings have to do less work. Greatly benefit from all of this nasty stuff.
Are we buying the oil from the Saudis?
It's a global market. Mm-hmm. So when they give us money, we can put it into the global market, buying petroleum and stuff like that.
Back from them and other people.
Well, that's why I say basically we give them weapons for oil.
Yeah.
And then we have the petrodollar, which maintains the status quo. But I really, part of me just wants to see how these urban liberals react to the reality.
Oh, I've gone through this. If you exposed all humans to all human trauma at once, it would obliterate the human mind. It might turn everyone into
I'm just
organic
saying,
savages.
give them what they want.
But it might not. It might help us.
Look at that dude. He's trying to get a heart, right? But he's refusing to get vaccinated, so
Right.
they took him off the list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how's that universal health care sounding now? So these people on the left, their attitude is, but vaccines are good. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, sure, okay. What happens when the government comes and says, we want you to undergo this, this treatment, otherwise you won't get your medical treatment, and something you disagree with? Don't give the government the authority to mandate that you get a medical treatment in exchange for life-saving treatment. That's why we always got to have private healthcare as an option. But I'm just saying, all of these hippie, these leftists, these liberal types, I long for the day they get everything they want in a sense. I really don't, because it would be chaos and everything would fall apart. But for them to just have that moment where they go, oh, now I get it. And then just to have that loss wash over them, where all of a sudden they can't eat, they're struggling to live, electricity is through the roof. These people, I've found an interesting correlation between people who are socialist and an interesting overlap between people who are socialist and people who have never been to a socialist country.
Yep.
It seems to be the same group of people.
Oh my gosh, going to Chile completely changed my worldview about policing and about socialization of police. Like, they have just national police. It's completely socialized. It was terrifying, because you'd see feds on every street corner. You'd see just feds standing there with their guns and their uniforms. And it's like, there's no one to protect you from the feds at that point. So you got to kind of desocialize law enforcement. I mean, we have a sort of interwoven socialized system of layered socialism, system of socialism. So it's a little more, less like blanket socialism.
Yeah, or if you go to like other countries like Cuba, or countries, former Soviet satellite countries, satellite republics, I guess it was called. And the people that come to America, or again, Cubans, Venezuelans, they know their stuff. They talk about love of freedom and the Constitution and, all the ideals that the left hates. I mean, they're so, they know.
Well, another thing they say is that you can't lose the U.S. because this is the last place in the world like this. And I was going to say, too, that with the monoclonal antibodies things, one of the things that they're saying, when Jen Psaki was asked about it, she was like, oh, well, it's because vaccines work. So you're telling me that if you don't get a vaccine, you also can have a monoclonal antibody. That really sounds kind of punitive to me. But that's what happens when you give the federal government that kind of power. And that's not something we should be trying to do at that level.
Well, let's take we'll take a poll of the our friends here at the crew in the IRL studio. If you were to show your average urban liberal everything that was supporting their way of life, from war, exploitation to experimentation, my opinion is that they would gladly accept it. If you went to them and said, here's how many kids were killed by Obama for you to get that, cheap computer, they'd be like, agreed. I'm happy with that. Do you guys agree with that?
100%.
Yeah.
I think they would, especially the urban elites in the Washington area. You look at the wealth concentrated in D.C. that continued during the recession of 2008, 2009, that continued with COVID, the growth in defense contractors over the many decades that are all based in the Washington, D.C. area. You can go on and on and on. And I truly think that's something I've learned from living here living in the DC area the last 8 years, that I've become more jaded, but I have that. Yeah, they would accept it.
Here's my question for these Democrat voters when they say, I'm voting Democrat for this reason, right? They want to tax the rich. Okay, Here's my question: how many children are you willing to kill in order to get higher taxes on the rich? Is it 1, 2, 3? Just give me a number, because Obama killed a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
Obama killed an American citizen named Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki in a drone strike on a civilian restaurant. I think it killed other people too. And the official response was, oops, we were trying to get somebody else.
Well, and we had that in Afghanistan. Not an American citizen, but we had that in Afghanistan with a drone strike. And the New York Times released this huge report, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, like how many kids are you willing to have killed for you is another way to phrase it. And then they might not say a lot. They might be like, oh, I don't want to have any kids. How many kids with parents who hate your freedom are you willing to have killed? Oh, well, now if they hate my freedom, that's dangerous. Now, look, they're going to be okay with the numbers. People are okay with numbers. I can deal with X and Y, but if you show them the image of the person being killed, it changes them.
Yeah.
Yes, and this is because of the concept of bloody hands at arm's length. If it's out of sight, it's out of mind. If you don't have to see it, you don't see the bombing in Syria. It doesn't bother you. It doesn't bother you that people are jumping out of windows in China.
I would just add, I think that my point is especially true with people in Washington. I think you go to some liberals in other parts of the country, outside of maybe LA and maybe New York City or Chicago, you could probably change some minds, but in terms of the ruling elites, it'd be hard to change their minds.
You get a bunch of people in public and you walk up to them and ask them, all of the benefits you receive with cheap gas, cheap products, international travel, a strong passport, come at the expense of children dying. How many children are you willing to have killed in your name to live this way? In public, they're going to be like, oh, that's really terrible, and none of us agree with that. But if you get someone truly, honestly in private, and it's I think, honestly, most people would be like, I don't want to have my TV shut off. I like all of the privileges and benefits that are afforded me. If you explain to people that slavery still exists today, that people who make your clothing and make your phones are effectively slaves, they'd shut up. I don't want to hear it. That's why when the conservatives criticized the left over having smartphones, they run into they go full speed in defense mode of putting out these silly comics. There's one where that guy is like, there's a peasant who says society is, sucks and we should improve it. And then the guy pops out of the well going, yet you participate in society, because they're very, very desperate to whitewash the narrative and be like, we're good people. We're good people. We're good people. Yo, I acknowledge it. I know full well these computers sitting, these monitor screens, my phone sitting in front of me. Yes, slave labor. I'm not a big fan of it. But I recognize, and I'll be fully honest about how the world works and understand the privileges and the benefits of everything we get. Cheap gasoline, the energy we use for our machines, the energies that comes from oil from around the world, and under Trump from this country, the fossil fuels. But there are a lot of people who want to lie because they want to pretend to be good people. They want to act like they're opposed to this, but they will vote for it every chance they get. You go to them in private and say, Barack Obama killed kids and signed the indefinite detention provision. You're gonna sign this. You're gonna sign away your rights, and you are going to get a $1 cheeseburger for the next 10 years. They're gonna be like, sign me up.
My problem is knowing that this is all built on slaves, even the plastic for this awesome comic book. Like, how do I stop acknowledging that? How do I stop myself from hating myself and want to destroy myself?
You just realize the world is what it is. Yeah. Now, I think it's fair to say, we actively speak out against it. We challenge it, and we try to avoid a lot of that stuff. Some of it is seemingly unavoidable if you want to operate in this system, and I'm not going to pretend like it's not true. When a friend of mine who's an activist, I said, I was talking about this friend of mine. I was like, you claim to be on the left and you care about, fighting for these causes, but the reality is you're only fighting for your community, for your country. Mm-hmm. And they said, that's not true. I'm fighting for everybody. I said, no, you're not. You've got a Samsung laptop. It's made at the Foxconn laboratories. Those people are walking off the roof en masse to commit suicide. They put up suicide nets to catch them because their lives are miserable. You don't care about those people. You're putting money into that. You're supporting that system. They want to believe that they're good people fighting the good fight. But the reality of the world is that most people can't see that far. Most people don't realize all the pain and suffering that goes into everything they have. I get it. I don't like it. I'll try to avoid it. I try, to products made in America by good, free and fair labor and everything like that. But we don't make stuff in this country anymore, which is why one of the reasons I voted for Trump in 2020 was because I would rather have a shirt cost $20 that I can only own a few of if it's made by someone who gets an honest living, as opposed to having these sweatshop factories overseas where we exploit cheap labor where they don't get health care or anything like that. I'm not in favor of that. I'd like the world to be a better place, but I tell you, I rest assured the average person and most of the people living in cities would sign on the dotted line and sign that deal with the devil to get cheap crap because they don't want to have to do the work to get it, and it's exploitative, but they're for it, and they want to pretend they're opposed to it, but they support it every chance.
I don't know. Have we ever had a not a slave capital society? We had the Romans, then we had the Middle Ages where it was all serfdom and slavery. What were you going to say, Lydia?
We have not, and this is an interesting point because there has always been slavery in the world, and people tend to try to tie it to America, which is incredibly unfair because we did not start it. We ended it. We did end it. And one of the things that you guys should do, because I know this is depressing, is go to humanprogress.org, because I know the world looks bleak sometimes, but it is very much better for more people than it has ever been good for before. We are reducing poverty at an incredible rate. People have more fresh water. We have lower infant mortality rates. And even though people aren't actually reproducing as much as they should be to keep humanity going, there are at least other things that are making life better for most people.
Yeah. Let's get the conversation up a notch. Yeah. Let's say you get a president who's like, we're going to go to war in the Middle East. We're going to fight for the Cut-a-Turkey pipeline. We're going to start a war in Ukraine to push back Russia. And if you don't vote for that and you get someone who's an isolationist, China takes over and they kill substantially more people. Mm-hmm. So the question is isn't even how many people are you willing to sacrifice. The question is people will die no matter what.
Right.
And it's a very, very complicated and difficult problem we face as humans.
It's part of why it's been offensive wars like the history. You attack so that you don't get attacked. And
Right.
it's always, that's the cycle.
If the United States pulls back from the world stage and rescinds the American empire, that gap will be filled by someone. And so you end up with these neocons, these war hawks who are like, I'd rather it be me than someone else. I can certainly understand that worldview. I don't believe in that kind of philosophical, moral position of it's better that I'm subjecting people to pain and suffering because someone else would do it anyway. I'm like, well, you're committing an immoral act. We should push back against the immoral acts, but not commit them. It's tough, man.
Yeah. It's uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable conversation. And I'll just point out, and beyond products, the two of the biggest events in the world this year, the Olympics in China and the World Cup at the end of the year in Qatar, all produced by slave labor.
Yep.
That, around Thanksgiving, Christmas time, everybody's going to be tuning in for soccer. And that's been one of the huge stories, but people are still going to tune in.
Yep.
The reason I say it's mostly city people is because people who live out in the middle of nowhere, conservative types and rural types believe in personal responsibility, are responsible for a lot of their own food, and they're willing to roll up their sleeves and do hard work. But people in cities, man, they just want to exploit, extract. Not every single person, just a lot of them. Mm-hmm. Think about the person who works at BuzzFeed, right? How much do they pay people at BuzzFeed? 50 to 90K. If you look at Glassdoor.com. And what's their job? To write garbage, poisonous trash. BuzzFeed is complete garbage. And they're not the only ones. There's right-wing garbage too, don't get me wrong. The issue is there's no reason in any sane reality that someone at BuzzFeed should be making that much money. Because there are people who drive buses who deserve more than that, because driving a bus does something for society. But writing about Brad Pitt's junk does not. And they make tons of cash. All of these big New York media companies are garbage. And it's an example of these people who are providing nothing, but they're extracting everything.
Yeah, writing about, I don't know, some model, or the latest, Britney Spears video or something.
Yeah. I went to BuzzFeed, Britney's face is at the top.
Yeah, Britney Spears.
Yeah.
Britney Spears. Okay, it's fine. That's Entertainment Tonight, the magazines you read at the checkout at the grocery store. But, seriously, to think that those organizations make the money that they do is just simply astounding. And, of course, as you remember, BuzzFeed, a combination with all their listicles and talking about, this person's junk or, this person's hairdo, they're the ones that partnered with, John Brennan and Clapper and Jake Tapper to release the Steele dossier.
Because they just want to extract. They're stealing the fine china from the ship after the iceberg was hit. They know it.
Yep.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Now, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.